Egypt Review, Part 2. Egyptian Society. The pharaoh was the god incarnate, top of the social pyramid. His duty was to maintain order. He was the leader of all armies and owner of all the lands and citizens. Next came the nobles and officials, highest position in bureaucracy. Members of the royal family. Second in command was the vizier, who served the high priest. Then priests and scribes, the educated class, highly respected because they could read and write. The priests served the gods and conducted rituals and ceremonies. Scribes kept records, numbers of soldiers and workers, food, collected taxes, and educated the young. Urchins and artisans earned a living in Egypt. Artisans created the goods that the merchants would sell. Many goods used for trade. Example, potters, carpenters, and goldsmiths. Peasants, farmers, servants, and construction workers. The common folk, majority of the population. Attached to an estate of the pharaoh, nobles, or rich landowner, barely made enough to live by. Fellahin, a portion of their profit as landowners goes to the rent and taxes. Corvée duty, provide labor for specific tasks. Slaves were usually prisoners of wars. Men were soldiers, farmers, or laborers, and women were household workers. The slaves could be set free by their masters. Women's rights. Women did not share equal rights and could not hold office unless part of the royal family. Women were a key role in domestic life, though they never did any physical labor. They gained property rights in the New Kingdom. Women's property rights were protected if she divorced. She was expected to tend to all her husband's needs, be a good mother, feed him, etc. Polygamy was not very common. Family. People highly valued family. Children were a blessing from the gods. Lower class, mothers would raise the children. Higher class, the servants would raise the children in place of the mothers. Marriage. Girls married at 12 to boys a few years older. Either an arranged marriage or you could choose your spouse. Divorce was not common, though possible. Entertainment. Main attraction was through the Nile. People went swimming, fishing, there were boat outings, and hippo and crocodile hunting. Wealthy people would host parties. Children played with many toys, and commoners came together to celebrate the gods and throw large parties. Government. In the beginning, Egypt was split into Lower and Upper Egypt. Red Crown was Lower Egypt, White Crown was Upper Egypt. The pharaoh was in charge of everything, and the vizier carried out decisions made by the pharaoh. Education. Ultimate goal, be accepted into a high position. Most were taught by their mothers and fathers, therefore hardly anyone went. The Hyksos. Ruler of foreign lands or shepherd kings. Asiatic people who invaded eastern Nile Delta and ruled Lower and Middle Egypt for 300 years. They never got to Upper Egypt because of Thebes. Their invasion met very little resistance because of the weak rulers, the internal instability, and the Hyksos had superior weapons such as arrowheads, crossbows, and chariots. The Hyksos adapted to Egyptian life. They used Egyptian hieroglyphics, kept political title and organization, and kept and adopted religious practices. The result was 300 years of stable rule. They were tolerated but never truly accepted. A resistance from Thebes will use the Hyksos' own technology to drive them out. The warrior kings, rulers from the 18th and 19th dynasties who put national defense first. They vowed never to let Egypt fall to foreign rule again, focus on militaristic rule, and expansion and imperialism. Thutmose I, 1504 to 1492 BC. He was not royal, but a military commander, who succeeded Amenhotep I, who had no heir. He was a brilliant military leader. He took over Nubia, which had gold and copper and gems. He was the first warrior king who brought in the new kingdom. He controlled the Near East, Syria, and Palestine, made Thebes the capital, built the Temple of Karnak, and was the first to be buried in the Valley of Kings. Thutmose II, 1492 to 1479, son of Thutmose I from a lesser wife, married his fully royal sister Hatshepsut, expanded his army through conscription, and his army defeated rebellions in Nubia and Kush. Hatshepsut, 1479 to 1458 BC, ruled as a co-regent and regent because her stepson, Thutmose III, was too young, so she ruled for 22 years. Constructed the government, made it efficient and effective, and therefore won people's support. Her son led military campaigns she presided over. She renewed trade and traveled to Punt, Africa, for gold, animals, trees, slaves, and oils. Memorialized in a massive wall relief in her temple, gave a rebirth to art. Building and structures made for her legacy show how great she was. Still a mystery as to how her cartouche was removed from monuments. Theory 1. Damatio Memoriae. Deliberate erasing of a person's name, image, in an attempt to cause them to die a second death in the afterlife, a permanent death, allegedly by Thutmose III. Second theory. Thutmose III, again, readjusted history by lessening her accomplishments. Third theory, priests did it, to eliminate all signs of a female ruler, which was a threat to religion. The removing of her cartouche seriously destroyed key archaeological evidence and slowed the recognition of her accomplishments. Thutmose III, 1479 to 1425, son of Thutmose II and Isis, who was a lesser wife. He ruled for 22 years as co-regent and 32 years on his own. He led Hatshepsut's armies, and he was a brilliant general. He made military innovations such as body armor, large numbers, and the use of chariots. The largest empire in Egypt, led 17 campaigns and conquered 350 cities. Had 20 years of peace and stability, and he built many temples and obsoletes. Wrote his own history. History is written by the winners. Succeeded, intentionally or not, in erasing Hatshepsut from history. Akhenaten, 1352 to 1336. Originally Amenhotep IV. Wife was Nefertiti. Changed Egypt's polytheistic religion. Believed they should worship the sun god Aten. Even changed his name to add Aton in it. Re-established Pharaoh equals God. Made the new religion a monotheistic one. The new capital of Egypt was Akhenaten. Built open temples for Aten for sunlight. Ordered pictures of a moon Ra plus the lesser gods destroyed. Wanted to curb the priests' power because they were corrupt and corrupted their religion. Seen as a heretic instead, he went about destroying the priests' rule the wrong way. Tutankhamun, 1341 to 1322, son of Akhenaten from a lesser wife, was 8 years old at ascension to the throne, died after an 8-year reign, though he restored polytheism in Egypt. He was most famous for the discovery of his tomb. In 1922, Howard Carter discovered him in the Valley of the Kings, provided a rich source about burial practices, and his tomb was the only one that hadn't been raided by tomb robbers. The Curse of King Tut. Tutankhamun was also the last ruler of the 18th dynasty. Ramses II, 1279 to 1213. Egypt's most greatest and powerful ruler, Ramses the Great, had a 66-year rule. He shared his rule with his father, Seti I, and was a commander-in-chief to the army. Regained territory Akhenaten lost and re-established trade routes, therefore a war against Nubia and Syria. He led 8 campaigns against the Hittites, Egypt's greatest enemies. The Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites. Ramses was nearly captured and killed, but he escaped and was victorious. Therefore, he was very glorified. History is written by the winners. The Battle of Kadesh was the first peace treaty in history. It was written in hieroglyphics and cuneiform. Cemented by Ramses' marriage to a Hittite princess, led to 60 years of peace and stability. Note, Ramses fathered over 100 children. The Valley of the Kings, located in the west bank of the Nile. From the 11th to the 16th century, there were tombs built for pharaohs and powerful nobles of the New Kingdom. It is a royal cemetery, 2 valleys. East, majority of tombs are located, and west, the west is associated with the dead. Arab Spring, a wave of revolutionary protests, riots, and civil wars that occurred in 2009, therefore the cause of Egypt's instability. Protests led to the downfall of the government from Jan to Feb 2011. Dozens of ancient sites have been broken into and looted, including the Cairo Museum. There's a lack of heavy security. There has been a huge decline in tourism because of Arab Spring. Cities of ancient Egypt. Giza, capital of the Old Kingdom and the 3rd largest city in Egypt, was a necropolis for all the royalty, became a sacred place for pharaohs' tombs. Most tombs were broken into after Giza was abandoned during the First Intermediate Period. Ramses II built his tomb in front of the Sphinx in Giza, and his 4th son, Khem-Weset, brought the Giza Plateau back to life. Thebes and Luxor, located on the Nile, included the Temple of Karnak and Luxor, and the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens. When Egypt was unified, Thebes was the capital of Egypt, a very important site because of the number of temples located there. Akhenaten, horizon of the Aten, early in the New Kingdom on the west bank of the Nile. Established by Akhenaten during his monotheistic reign and dedicated to Aten. Aten was not anthropomorphic, but the sun disk itself. Lessens the priest's powers by closing all the temples dedicated to the gods. Akhenaten controlled Egypt spiritually and politically. Alexandria, the pearl of the Mediterranean, founded by Alexander the Great in 31 BCE. It was divided into 3 zones: Rhakotis, in the western part of the city; Brucian, the most developed area in the middle of the city, the royal quarter; and the Jewish quarter. In the east part of the city, a very high Jewish immigration. Alexandria became the capital until the early 7th century CE. The most powerful city for almost 1,000 years. Hellenism, the spread of Greek culture in 323 BC. Library of Alexandria, largest library of the ancient world, partly burned down by Julius Caesar in 48 BCE, and then in 390 CE by Theodosius, out of his hatred for paganism. Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, built by Ptolemy the First and Second in 280 to 247 BC, damaged by earthquakes in 956, 1303, and 1323 CE. Ruins were turned into a fort. Review. Part 3. Accomplishments. Law. 4 main areas of law: property, marriage, inheritance, and tomb management. Mat was a key aspect. Pharaoh was in command, but a second, the vizier, handled most of the work. The high court was for serious cases, and the Kembet was for lesser crimes. There was no gender bias in law. All the sentences were harsh. They gave a suicide option. Sentences include beatings, forced labors, fed to crocodiles, torture, amputations. Hieroglyphics. Developed around 3000 BCE. Originally a collection of picture signs. Developed, the plus 700 signs represented sounds rather than words. Simpler forms of hieroglyphics: hieratic, cursive form, a pattern of lines; and demotic, used for practical matter because it's faster and simpler to write. A decree came out that abolished paganism rites and ended the use of hieroglyphics in 384 CE. Painting. Finest works of art were created for tombs and temples, usually representations of people, scenes, and objects, aimed to reflect balance and harmony and the ideal life, so the ideal life would continue on into the afterlife. People were portrayed as young and attractive, with their hips facing forward and shoulders at full width. The Egyptian people wanted to be immortalized in their paintings, never be forgotten. Sculptures depicted subjects such as religious festivals, military victories, important people and gods. The artist intended to capture the grandeur and ideal character of the subject, not to portray them. Egyptian sculptures reflected some of the basic values and beliefs of Egyptian society. Technology, the building of the pyramids. There are 4 stages to building pyramids. First stage, planning and selecting a site. Step 2, mining stage. Step 3, transportation. They use boats. Step 4, actual construction, built from the base up, using supply ramps when necessary. Other advancements in technology include weaponry, papyrus, and ships. Medicine, practice of mummification taught them a great deal about dissection in human anatomy. Spells and rituals were used. There was a great belief in magic. There was no knowledge of bacteria. Believed most sicknesses were caused by an evil spirit or demon. They had general physicians and some specialists. Priests examined the patients and consulted medical texts before attempting a cure. The most popular drug was honey. These practices helped shape the future of medical advancements. Leading cause of death was infections through the teeth and the feet. Mathematics. Egyptians invented geometry, not only area of squares, circles, and cubes, but also the volume of cylinders and spheres. Pi, 3.14. Used a numerical system with 10 at the base, but they had no 0. They also had fractions. Time. Developed calendar based on the cycles of the moon. 12 months, 3 seasons. Calendars helped predict the Nile flooding. New Year coincided with the flooding of the Nile. The star Sirius disappeared 70 days before the Nile flooded, marked the first lunar cycle. Each new year had to be reset due to its inaccuracy. In the early dynastic period, a new calendar was made to support the collection of taxes. Had 3 seasons, 4 months each season, 30 days each month, and 360 days. Hereru Rempe, last 5 days of the year, dedicated to the children of Nut. Sundial, a measurement of time. First one found was in the Valley of the Kings. Showed time by the shadow cast by the sun onto the plate marked the hours of the day. Papyrus, made from the plant Cyprus papyrus. Used papyrus during the First Dynasty. End of study guide.